The first shot cracked the night like a snap bone. Not thunder, not a fallen tree. I knew the difference the way you know your own name. The sound came from the eastern ridge, traveled low, disciplined, suppressed, but not enough to fool someone who had once made a living reading Death by A. Someone was hunting on my mountain. I didn't move. Not yet. I stood on the porch of my cabin, coffee cooling in my hand, the smell of pine and cold iron filling my lungs. The fence line, 3 miles of reinforced steel posts and motion sensors, had gone silent 10 minutes earlier. No alerts, no alarms, which meant one of two things. Either the system had failed, or whoever crossed it knew exactly how to kill it. I smiled, slow and thin. Most people bought land to escape trouble. I bought a mountain because trouble never bothered to climb this high. Or so I thought. Another shot followed, closer this time. Too close. Down in the valley, a mule deer screamed, a sharp, almost human sound. Then nothing. The silence afterward was louder than the gunfire. Poachers. Not amateurs either. They didn't just trespass. They erased their footprints, jammed cheap drones, cut cameras with precision. They believed this mountain was empty, forgotten, owned by a faceless name on a county ledger. They had no idea the man who owned it had once been paid to disappear people from farther distances than this. I set my mug down. Inside the cabin, beneath the reclaimed oak floorboards, a hidden panel slid open with a soft mechanical sigh. The rifle waited there, wrapped in oilcloth, patient as a sleeping predator. I hadn't touched it in 3 years. I'd promised myself I was done, but the mountain was mine, and someone had just bled on it. Far below, unaware they'd already been seen, the poachers moved deeper into the timber, laughing softly, congratulating themselves on an easy night's work. They thought the fence was the only thing guarding this place. They were wrong. I bought the mountain under a shell company. Cash deal, no ceremony. 2,000 acres of granite spine and dense timber, hours from the nearest paved road. No cell signal. No tourists. The locals thought I was either crazy or hiding from the law. The truth was simpler. I needed quiet. After 16 years as a military sniper and 4 more as something I never put on paper, quiet was the only thing that kept the ghost manageable. The cabin was modest from the outside, solar panels, a wood stove, a wraparound porch, but underneath it was built like a bunker. Old habits die hard. Redundant power. Hardened comms. Overwatch positions disguised as rock outcroppings. I told myself it was just preparation. Insurance. Tonight, it was necessity. I moved fast but silent, slipping into my cold weather gear, muscle memory taking over. The rifle felt heavier than I remembered, or maybe my conscience did. I chambered around, not to fire, yet, but to feel the click. Familiar. Steadying. The thermal scope flickered to life as I stepped into the tree line. 3 heat signatures clustered near the creek bed. 1 kneeling. 1 standing watch. 1 dragging something heavy. The deer. Anger is dangerous in the field. It makes you sloppy. I breathed it out, slow, until all that remained was clarity. These weren't starving locals. Their gear was high-end. Night optics. Suppressed rifles. They'd sell the meat, the antlers, maybe worse. This wasn't desperation. This was business. And they were doing business on my land. I tracked parallel to them, uphill, using the wind. They joked quietly, unaware the mountain itself had shifted against them. I could leave, call wildlife enforcement, let the system handle it. But systems fail. Fences go quiet. And some lessons only stick when they are personal. I didn't fire. Not yet. Instead, I keyed a small device on my belt. A low-frequency pulse rippled outward, invisible, inaudible. Down the slope, their comms crackled and died. One of them cursed under his breath. Confusion is the first crack in confidence. They stopped moving. I smiled again, this time without warmth. The mountain remembered who I was. And by the end of the night, so would they. They froze when their radios went dead. That pause, 3 men standing perfectly still in the timber, told me more than any conversation ever could. Professionals pause. Amateurs panic. These men knew enough to be dangerous, but not enough to know when they were already outmatched. I watched through thermal as a standing guard raised a clenched fist. The kneeling one slowly stood. The third, still bent over the deer, hesitated before letting go, as if reluctant to abandon his prize. Priorities like that get people killed. They whispered. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. I'd seen the choreography before, in deserts and cities half a world away. Establish security. Identify threat. Decide whether to fight or flee. They chose wrong. I circled uphill, boots finding stone and frozen earth without a sound. The snow helped. Fresh enough to hold impressions, cold enough to crunch if you rushed. I didn't rush. I became part of the slope, another dark shape among shadows and trunks. At 100 meters, I stopped, not because I had to, but because I wanted to see their faces. I shifted the scope from thermal to low light. 3 men, late 20s, early 30s. Beards. Expensive gear worn like costumes. One had a skull patch on his pack, always the skulls. Men who borrow symbols of death because they've never actually met it. The leader, the one giving signals, had a short-barreled rifle in confidence he hadn't owned. He scanned the tree line, slow and methodical, but he was looking outward. None of them thought to look uphill. Nobody ever does. I let 10 seconds pass. Then 20. Then I stepped on a branch. Not loud, just enough. The sound snapped their heads toward me. Weapons came up, muzzle searching. Their breathing spiked. I could see it fogging the air. Who's there? Someone called. His voice cracked on the second word. I didn't answer. Silence is a language all its own. I took another step forward, letting my outline resolve just enough to be seen between the trees. A lone figure. Rifle slung. No headlamp. No panic. You're trespassing, I said calmly. I pitched my voice downhill so it carried but didn't echo. Authority lives in tone, not volume. The leader frowned. This is public land. I smiled in the dark. No, it isn't. They exchanged glances. The one with the skull patch muttered something. I caught the word bullshit. I raised my rifle, not aiming at them, just enough that the silhouette was unmistakable. Drop your weapons, I said, and back away from the animal. They laughed, a short, nervous bark. Yeah, the leader said. Or what? That was the moment. The thin, fragile point where everything could still go one of 2 ways. I fired. The round punched into the date 6 inches from the leader's boot. Snow and soil exploded upward. He jumped back with a shout, tripping over his own feet. I don't miss, I said evenly. I choose. No laughter now, just breathing. Fast, ragged. The kneeling one, youngest, I guess, started to lower his rifle. The skull patch guy didn't. His finger tightened. I saw it before he even knew he'd decided. I shifted aim and fired again. His rifle flew out of his hands as the round shattered the stock clean in half. The recoil knocked him backward into the snow. He screamed, not from pain, but from shock. That did it. All 3 dropped their weapons. Hands where I can see them. I ordered. Slow. They complied. Clumsy. Adrenaline makes people stupid. I moved closer, never stopping, never letting my pace match theirs. Unpredictability keeps you alive. At 10 meters, I could see their eyes clearly. Fear strips away bravado fast. You kill that deer for sport. I asked. No, the youngest stammered. We sell, I mean. I cut him off with a raised hand. I don't care why, I said. I care that you crossed my fence, disabled my systems, and fired suppressed weapons on my land. The leader swallowed. Look, man, we didn't know anyone lived out here. We'll pack up, leave. No harm done. I glanced at the deer. Its eyes were still open. Harm was done, I said quietly. I walked past them, boots crunching now, deliberately loud. I keyed another device. From somewhere deep in the forest, engines coughed to life, low, distant, unmistakable. Their heads snapped around. What the hell is that? Skullpatch asked. My cameras, I said. My drones. My backup generators. Everything you thought you disabled. They stared at me like I'd just stepped out of a ghost story. I leaned close to the leader. Here's how this ends. You're going to kneel. You're going to zip tie your own hands. And you're going to wait. Wait for what? He whispered. For daylight, I said, and for the authorities. Wildlife enforcement. Federal, if I feel like it. His face drained of color. You can't just. I can, I interrupted, and I will. They knelt. As they bound their own wrists, I felt something shift inside me. Not satisfaction, not relief, recognition. This mountain wasn't just a place I owned. It was a line, and tonight, someone had crossed it. I looked up at the ridgeline, stars sharp and cold above the trees. Somewhere in the dark, the ghosts watched quietly. I stayed awake with the prisoners until dawn, because old habits don't let you sleep, and because I knew, deep down, this wouldn't be the last time someone came looking for what they thought was an empty mountain. Dawn didn't come gently. It never does in the mountains. One moment the forest is a cathedral of shadow, the next it's exposed, every mistake, every footprint, every drop of blood lit up in pale gold. I welcomed it. Darkness hides intentions. Daylight exposes truth. The three men knelt where I left them, back stiff, knees sunk into frozen ground. They hadn't slept. Neither had I. I spent the night above them on overwatch, rifle resting on a rock I'd memorized years ago. Old habits. Every time one of them shifted too much, my finger tightened just enough to remind myself I still had control. By sunrise, they were shaking, not just from cold. I moved downhill openly now, no attempt at stealth. Power isn't always about being unseen. Sometimes it's about being unmistakably present. Stand up, I said. They struggled to their feet, hands bound behind their backs with bright orange zip tie from my pack. I chose that color on purpose. Hunters hate visibility. Fear hates it too. The leader squinted at me in the light, finally getting a clear look. He frowned, confused. You don't look like a park ranger, he said. I shrugged. I'm not. Then who the hell are you? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked past him again, this time toward the day. Up close, the damage was worse than I'd thought. Sloppy shot placement. They hadn't needed to rush it, but they had. I knelt, closed the animal's eyes, and stood back up. Turn around, I told them. They did. That's when they saw it. The fence. Not the outer perimeter, the one they thought they'd cut through, but the inner line. Reinforced steel posts anchored into rock, running silently through the trees like a scar. Cameras nested in bark. Motion sensors disguised as lichen-covered stones. The kind of system you don't build unless you expect intrusion. Oh, war. What the hell? Skullpatch whispered. This mountain isn't empty, I said. It's controlled. The youngest swallowed hard. You military. I considered lying. Decided not to. That single word landed heavier than any threat. The sound of engines grew louder. 2 ATVs crested the ridge, autonomous, moving slow and deliberate. No drivers. The men stared like they were watching ghost ride machines. Jesus Christ, the leader muttered. Who are you really? I'm the man who gets to decide what happens next, I said. I marched them uphill, past the fence, toward a clearing that used to be a helipad long before I bought the land. I'd restored it quietly, reinforce it, just in case. I activated my comms and patched into a secure line. Wildlife enforcement would take at least 3 hours to reach this place. Federal agents longer. I had time. We reached the clearing. I made them sit. Talk, I said. Start with how you found this place. The leader hesitated. I didn't rush him. Silence does the work for you if you let it. Forum, he finally said. Private one. Guys share coordinates. Remote spots. Places no one checks. How many know about this mountain? He licked his lips. A few. Not many. I nodded. That was worse than if he'd said dozens. Names, I said. Skullpatch scoffed. You think we're gonna? I turned and fired a single round into a rusted oil drum at the edge of the clearing. The echo rolled across the valley like thunder. Birds exploded from the trees. When the sound died, Skullpatch was pale. I don't threaten, I said calmly. I demonstrate. They talked. Usernames. Drop points. Buyers. Middlemen. One name made my jaw tighten, a man I crossed paths with years ago, back when my job didn't involve fences or solar panels. Some people never leave the shadows. They just change business models. When they were done, I sat back and studied them. 3 men who thought they were predators, now realizing they were prey who'd wandered into the wrong ecosystem. "You going to kill us?" the youngest asked quietly. I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't evil. Just stupid. Ambition without understanding consequence. "No," I said. "That would be easy." They flinched anyway. The authorities arrived just before noon. 2 wildlife officers and 1 federal agent who pretended this was routine. I handed over everything: weapons, footage, coordinates, confessions recorded on my body cam. The agent lingered after the others led the men away. "You live out here alone?" he asked. "Yes." He studied the fence, the clearing, the drones humming softly overhead. "Ever consider you might be the most dangerous thing on this mountain?" I met his gaze. "I know." He nodded once. "Call us if this happens again." When I corrected, he didn't argue. By afternoon, the mountain was quiet again. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums with unfinished business. I dragged the deer deeper into the forest, performed the work the poachers hadn't bothered to do. Waste is disrespect. My father taught me that long before the military did. As I cleaned my hands in the creek, I noticed something that hadn't been there the night before. Fresh tracks. Not boots. Tires. Small. Light. Recent. I followed them until they vanished into rock, but not before spotting a glint of plastic cord on a branch. A drone casing. Civilian model. Cheap. Someone had been watching. I stood there for a long time, listening to the mountain breathe. The fence had been crossed once. Now I knew it had been tested twice. And tests are never the end. They are the beginning. I spent that night wide awake. The first intrusion had been loud, sloppy, and stupid, nothing like the precision the mountain was capable of revealing. But the tracks in the snow told a different story. Small tires, too light to be a quad or ATV. Drone casing cord on a branch. Whoever had come back was smarter. Calculated. They didn't just want the mountain. They wanted to test me. See how I reacted. Learn my patterns. Find the cracks. I moved to the ridge, rifle in hand, binoculars slung over my shoulder. From there, I could see the valley below where the first encounter happened. The deer's carcass had been removed by the authorities, but the scent of human panic lingered. Not the officers, the poachers. Fear leaves a residue you can track if you know how to read it. I crouched behind a jagged rock, scanning every shadow, every bend of the river. And then I saw it, a flicker of movement across the ridge, too calculated to be deer or elk. Something low, fast, and deliberate. I smiled. Game on. I didn't move in immediately. That's rookie behavior. Instead, I waited. The mountain teaches patience. I watched the shadow circle the same path 3 times before it vanished behind a clump of spruce. By the 3rd pass, the figure was walking upright, not running, scanning, watching, almost testing me. I traced the path downhill quietly, picking my way along ridges and stones. Old habits returned naturally, the soft step, the controlled breathing, the mental map of terrain. I felt alive again, dangerous in a way that desk jobs, mortgages, and quiet cabins never could. By the time I reached the edge of the timber, I caught movement again. A small quad bike, painted black, the rider hunched low, drone buzzing overhead like a mosquito. Whoever it was didn't expect anyone out here at this hour. I stayed in shadow, counting heartbeats, breathing with the wind, letting them pass within 10 meters before I moved. The rider didn't see me, or thought they didn't. That was their first mistake. I fired a warning shot, not at the rider, but into the snowbank just beyond the path. Snow exploded, tiny ice shards spraying, a sharp crack echoing like a whip. The drone dipped, the rider cursed, and in that single second, I learned more about them than I could from interrogations. They were young, overconfident, and reckless, and they thought technology made them untouchable. They weren't wrong, but they were incomplete. I moved faster now, keeping them in sight but remaining invisible. The quad zigzagged, tires biting snow, scanning the tree line. The drone hummed above, Too close to be cautious, too loud to be a professional job. Something inside me clicked. I'd faced this before. No matter the gear, no matter the tech, someone relying entirely on machines in the field is always vulnerable to the human element. I picked my position atop a steep incline. From here, the quad would have to cross open ground, exposed to fire or observation. The drone's buzzing got louder. They were scanning for me now, maybe sensing my presence, but not knowing where. I allowed myself a small grin. The mountain was mine, but tonight it would remind them of that fact. I fired a small flare into the air. Not lethal, not intended to injure, just a bright, screaming warning. The quad skidded violently, snow spraying. The drone wobbled, then crashed into a tree with a satisfying snap. The rider cursed and tried to retreat, but I had already blocked their path. They stopped, frozen for the first time since the chase began. That moment, the hesitation, the fear, was mine to exploit. I didn't approach immediately. Instead, I called down, voice carrying clearly across the valley. "You're not alone out here. You never were." The rider looked around, confused, panicked. Their eyes scanned the slope, the tree line, trying to find me. But I was already repositioning. Silent, a shadow among shadows. "Who's there?" they shouted, voice cracking with adrenaline. "Someone who doesn't like poachers," I replied. "Someone who knows a mountain better than you know your drone." The quad skidded again, trying to find an escape route. Tires tore through snow, leaving deep tracks, but the path led only into denser timber. I knew every tree, every boulder, every hidden slope. They didn't. I closed the distance, taking the steepest, most direct route. By the time they realized I was closing in, I was already behind them, my boots silent on snow-covered roots. One quick sweep of my rifle barrel against the quad's handlebars, and the machine toppled sideways, tires spinning uselessly. The rider fell, skidding into a mound of snow. They groaned, panicked, trying to scramble back to their bike. I put a hand on the back of their jacket, pressed them down into the cold, and didn't let go. "Enough games," I said, voice low and calm, as if I were talking to a misbehaving child. They whimpered. "Please." "I didn't. I just—" "You tested me," I interrupted. "You crossed lines you didn't understand existed. You think technology makes you untouchable. You're wrong, and now you're going to learn the hard way." Their eyes went wide. They were still alive. Their fear was palpable. But I wasn't here to kill. Not yet. Not unless they forced me. I retrieved the drone from the tree branch, smashed it underfoot, then moved the quad to the edge of the clearing. I disabled it completely, making sure no one could ride away and call reinforcements. "Do you understand now?" I asked, crouching beside them. Snowflakes melted into their hair. "Yes," they stammered. I get it." "Good." I helped them stand, not to show mercy, but to make the lesson stick. "Next time, you won't be so lucky. This mountain doesn't forgive mistakes." I marched them uphill, keeping them under control. This time, I wasn't taking prisoners to wait for authorities. I was creating evidence, teaching boundaries. Every tree, every slope, every shadow bore witness to what happened when someone underestimated the mountain's owner. By the time I reached the cabin, my body ached in ways only a night of hunting and climbing could produce. But adrenaline masked it. The rider, quiet now, trembling, stood a few steps behind. I guided them inside. "Warmth, coffee, silence. Call whoever you came with," I said. "Tell them this mountain isn't a playground." They didn't argue. They didn't protest. They nodded, too afraid to speak. I gave them a small, almost imperceptible warning. One misstep, one attempt to come back, and the mountain itself will be their last witness. I watched them leave at first light, the snow crunching beneath boots, quad pushed to the side. They vanished into the tree line, back toward the road, shaken and humbled. Alone again, I sat on the porch, rifle across my knees, looking down at the valley. The wind whispered through the pines, carrying with it the faint smell of burned drone plastic and adrenaline. The mountain was quiet, but the quiet was never permanent. I knew they would talk. Someone always does. And when they did, More eyes would be curious, more intruders would test me. Good. Let them come. Because I had learned something tonight as well, more than just their recklessness or overconfidence. I'd learned the mountain remembered every step, every echo, every shadow. And so did I. And when the shadows returned, I would be waiting. I should have known the first night wasn't the end. Poachers aren't rational. They are persistent, greedy, stubborn, and most importantly, they don't forget when they've been humiliated. The first group, the 3 men with drones and quad bikes, had vanished into a forest by dawn, but the tracks they left weren't just evidence. They were a warning. Someone had been watching. Someone had recorded their failure. And now, the second wave was on its way. I knew it before the sun rose. The air smelled different, tighter, charged with energy. The birds had stopped their morning songs. Even the wind seemed to hesitate at the treetops. Years of experience had taught me to read these signs, subtle but unmistakable. The mountain was alive, reacting, and so was I. I started preparing. The cabin became a command center. The rifles, pistols, and traps I had stashed over the years were pulled out, inspected, and cleaned. The drones were charged, silent and ready. Every path, every ridge, every hidden overlook was logged in my mind. This time, I wouldn't just react, I would dictate the terms. By late afternoon, I saw the first evidence. The tracks. Not one set this time. Dozens. ATV treads. Footprints. Packs. They were organized, moving with military precision. Someone had clearly done their homework. Whoever they weren't amateurs. They weren't just hunting deer. They were hunting me. I climbed to my overwatch perch near the North Ridge. From there, the valley stretched below, a frozen grid of paths, rocks, and shadows. I counted 20 figures, moving in loose formation. Most carried rifles, some equipped with night optics. They weren't here for casual poaching. They were here to take control and likely to kill. I activated one of my surveillance drones, sending it silently above the tree line. Its small camera transmitted real-time images to my tablet. I studied them carefully. Faces, gear, posture, weapons, formation. Every second of observation added to my advantage. Patience. That was my edge. Night fell fast in the mountains. The air grew bitter, the snow hard and reflective. The poachers moved into the first clearing, just below the ridge. They were establishing a base, likely thinking it was safe. They had no idea how exposed they really were. I watched them from above. I identified the leader, a tall man with a shaved head, wearing a tactical vest that looked brand new. This was different from the first wave. This one had planning, strategy, experience. Also, they thought. I didn't move. Not yet. I let them settle, then activated one of the old perimeter alarms, hidden sensors wired to emit a low-frequency pulse and trigger noise devices deep in the woods. A synthetic howl echoed across the valley. The poachers froze. The leader barked orders, trying to regroup. The others looked to each other, unease creeping in. Good. Fear makes people sloppy. I switched my drone to infrared, scanning the tree line for movement. One by one, I marked positions, memorized paths, calculated angles. Every tree, every boulder became part of my map. I was no longer on the defensive. I was a predator. I descended silently to a position 30 meters above their base, hidden behind a rock outcropping. From there, I could see them all clearly. They had set up small fires, unpacked gear, and were arguing over the terrain. Amateurs. I activated a second drone, smaller this time, equipped with a loudspeaker. I didn't need it to speak yet. I wanted them to know something invisible was already watching. The drone hovered, the cold motors barely audible over the wind. Then I spoke. You are trespassing on private property. You will leave immediately. The leader froze, scanning the tree line. Who said that? I didn't answer. Silence carried a weight words never could. They spread out, trying to locate me. That was their mistake. They had fragmented themselves in unfamiliar terrain. I had the high ground, knowledge of every slope, every hidden vantage. The first shot came not from me, but from a trap I had set days ago, a simple rig, baited with sound triggers. It fired a net that snagged the leader's backpack, pulling him backward into the snow. His team rushed to help him, cursing, disoriented. I used the confusion. One by one, I isolated them. Shadows moved through the trees like ghosts. A small flare here, a flash of reflective tape there. Nothing lethal, just disorienting. I could see panic spreading. They began to make mistakes, stepping too close to edges, tripping over hidden roots, leaving footprints that were easy to track. I had set up another device, a rope trip line tied to a small explosive charge that fired smoke and noise, designed to simulate a gunshot. One misstep, and it went off. The team scattered, firing blindly, and I observed without hesitation. Fear makes people predictable. By midnight, 5 of them were separated, cold and panicking. I moved in silently, capturing 2 more with minimal contact. They were terrified, eyes wide, shivering in the snow. Their leader and a few others had retreated deeper into the forest, thinking they could regroup and hunt me in the dark. Mistake. I activated my final drone, equipped with night vision and a small spotlight. It hovered above them, illuminating the trees, the rocks, and the ground. Every movement was visible. Every escape route accounted for. I didn't need to fire a single shot. Not yet. I waited, studying their patterns, listening to their whispers, their frantic commands, their fear. They were learning too late that this mountain didn't belong to them. It belonged to someone who had trained for nights like this, for prey like them. At 2 a.m., I made my move. I approached their temporary camp from above, using a ridge they hadn't accounted for. Snow muffled my boots. My breath was calm. Every sense was alert. I reached the first man, grabbed him, and pulled him silently into a depression in the snow. He didn't scream. He didn't even struggle. By now, he had learned fear is useless. One by one, I neutralized the scattered units. No unnecessary force, just control. They were learning the hard way that technology and numbers meant nothing against knowledge, patience, and the will of the mountain's owner. By 4 a.m., only the leader and 2 others remained. They had no idea how close they were to being surrounded. Exhaustion, fear, and confusion made them sloppy. I closed the perimeter silently, ensuring every escape route was watched, every hiding spot accounted for. When the first hints of sunlight struck the peaks, I called in the authorities, not to catch them unprepared, but to make the lesson permanent. I handed over the remaining 3, along with detailed evidence, GPS logs, drone footage, and a record of their movements throughout the night. The leader's face was pale, eyes wide. "How did you?" "I've lived in the shadows," I said quietly. "I've trained in them. And this mountain is mine." The authorities barely believed the scale of the operation, the coordination, or the fact that a single man had controlled 20 trained poachers in hostile terrain without a single fatality on either side. But the proof was undeniable. By mid-morning, the mountain was quiet again. Too quiet. I looked out over the ridges, the valleys, the tree lines. The tracks of the second wave had been erased by wind and snow, but the lesson remained. The mountain remembers. So do I. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The second wave had been smarter, faster, more organized, but they hadn't accounted for one thing: experience, patience, and the willingness to fight for what is yours. The mountain was mine, and I was ready. The third wave came differently. The first 2 had been testing me, reckless, overconfident, easily broken. This one was calculated, professional, cold. Whoever was behind it had studied every mistake the others had made. They had learned. They weren't here for day or quick profit or a cheap thrill. They were here for me. I knew at the moment I saw the first footprints in the snow, deep, booted, deliberate, and accompanied by a trail of small, high-tech devices, infrared sensors, low-flying drones, even automated snares. Someone wanted to control the mountain, and they were willing to come prepared. I didn't panic. I never did. I had trained for worse. I had survived worse. And this mountain had taught me to fight smarter than any opponent who thought numbers and gear could replace knowledge. The cabin became a fortress. Every window was reinforced, every trap checked, every rifle cleaned and loaded. I walked along the perimeter, checking sensors, sweeping the ridges, memoizing every conte. The wind was my ally, the snow my cloak, and the shadows my camouflage. I perched on the north ridge at dusk, overlooking the valley. They move in teams of 4, 2 ahead, 2 behind, spreading out, scanning for traps, looking for weaknesses. They were professionals, ex-military, likely, or trained contractors, but they underestimated one crucial factor. I knew the terrain better than anyone. Every ridge, every boulder, every deadfall was mapped in my mind. They moved like they owned the place. They did not. I activated a series of drones, each with a unique task. One monitored their flanks, another scanned the tree line. The third hovered silently behind them, broadcasting small infrared pulses that triggered my hidden cameras. I was everywhere without moving. Night fell. The air grew sharp, teeth biting cold. They set up a temporary camp near Frozen Creek. Fires flickered weakly, illuminating tired faces and weapons trained toward the tree line. They believed they were secure. They were wrong. I approached silently, using the ridge to conceal my movement. A trip line snapped underfoot, a trap I had set days ago, but I was careful, already anticipating its activation. A net fired, snagging a pack, sending one of the intruders sprawling into snow. Panic spread immediately. Radios crackled, drones buzzed, and the intruder's carefully rehearsed plan began to crumble. They shouted orders to each other, but the snow muffled their voices, and the wind carried their fear to me. I moved closer, staying in shadow, picking my targets. One slipped into a ditch while trying to flank. Another froze, rifle raised, scanning for threats. The leader, tall, with a scar across his cheek, was calm but tense. He had the look of someone who knew how to survive, but he hadn't accounted for a mountain that fought back. I fired a warning shot into the snow near the leader. Snow erupted, the echo bouncing off the valley walls like thunder. He flinched. His men froze. Fear had finally arrived. "You don't belong here," I said. My voice carried clearly across the clearing. "You're trespassing on my property, on my mountain, and you're not leaving without learning that lesson." The leader laughed, short and bitter. "We're professionals. We've faced worse than a lone guy with a cabin in the woods." I stepped into a patch of moonlight, rifle slung, silhouette tall, movements deliberate. You face worse, maybe, but you never face the mountain itself. The intruders exchanged glances. That hesitation, fractions of a second, was all I needed. I activated the first trap remotely. A rope line sent a small bag flying through the air, tangling one of the men, pulling him down into snow. Another trap triggered, smoke and sparks erupting, simulating gunfire. Chaos. Controlled. Perfect. I moved in silently, boots crunching just enough to be heard, guiding them with my presence. Fear is the best teacher. It doesn't argue. It doesn't negotiate. It forces obedience. One by one, I isolated them. No lethal force. Yet, just enough control to keep them aware of how easily they could die if they underestimated me. By midnight, all but the leader and 2 others were neutralized. They huddled near the creek, exhausted, shivering, teeth chattering in the bitter cold. Their leader stood apart, scanning the ridge, calculating his next move. I knew what he would do, predictable, logical, but too slow. I moved along the ridge silently, positioning myself for the final confrontation. The wind shifted. I heard the soft buzz of drones above, the faint crunch of snow beneath careful boots. Timing, precision, patience, all the years of training led to this moment. I let them think they had a chance. I let the leader speak, try to negotiate. He underestimated me, assumed the mountain was just terrain, that I was just a man. He was wrong. I revealed myself fully, stepping from shadow to moonlight, rifle pointed but relaxed, eyes cold and steady. "This ends now." The leader hesitated. One of his men raised a hand, ready to fire, but I fired a warning round into the ground between them. Snow and stone exploded upward, deafening and blinding. Adrenaline surged. They froze. "Drop your weapons," I said. "All of you. Now." Silence. Then, slowly, they complied, hands raised, rifles lowered. I moved in, checking positions, controlling them, ensuring no one could escape or hide. "You've been warned twice," I said. "And now you face the consequences of ignoring those warnings." The leader's eyes widened. "Consequences? You can't. You're alone." "We." I cut him off with a cold laugh. "Alone? I am never alone. This mountain has watched, waited, and remembered. Every step you've taken, every mistake you've made, it's all been noted. And now I decide what happens next." I guided them back toward the cabin, the night echoing with their frightened whispers. Every crack of branch, every rustle in the snow reminded them they were not in control. I was. By dawn, authorities arrived, not because I called them, but because I ensured the evidence could not be ignored. Weapons, drones, GPS logs, and recorded movements all told a story of infiltration, intrusion, and utter defeat. The leader and his team were taken into custody, faces pale, eyes wide, never forgetting what had happened on this mountain. I stood on the porch afterward, rifle in hand, looking over the ridges. The snow glistened, cold and unyielding. Tracks of the intruders were already fading, erased by wind and drift. But the lesson remained. The mountain was mine, and anyone who tried to claim it, or me, would remember that fact. I poured a cup of coffee, savoring the bitter warmth. Silence returned, deep and total, broken only by the whisper of wind through the pines. The snow reflected the rising sun, pure and blinding, but underneath, shadows lingered. Shadows of those who thought they could trespass. Shadows of lessons learned too late. And deep in the valley, where the first deer once ran, life was quiet again. But I knew one thing: this mountain never forgets. And neither do I. The war was over. For now. But anyone daring enough to test me again would face a mountain that remembered every sound, every shadow, every heartbeat. And I would be waiting. The mountain and its owner had claimed victory. The line had been drawn, and it would never be crossed again.